Hello, I'm in the Shakespeare North. Again, I'm not really supposed to be here, but I've just done a video outside called What's the Flipping Point? And I do wonder what the flipping point is, to be honest. And I've just found out I've done it and there's no sound on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to overdub it, fill in the gaps, and I'm going to show you that footage because it was good footage. And I'm going to try and put sound effects on it and stuff like that, so I don't want it to go to waste. So, yeah, I'll show you that now, and I'll overdub it. See you in a minute. What's the flipping point? It's the first time, no, it's actually the second time that this has ever happened to me, where I've recorded an entire video and the sound has just not turned out for some reason. I still can't quite work out how it's done. From what I remember here, I'm sort of like talking about the weather. I'm talking about how a lovely morning it is walking in Prescot churchyard. Magnificent churchyard looked after by the Friends of Prescot churchyard and cemetery. They do an incredible job. And from what I remember here, I'm talking about an old school chum, and I think his name was Bobby Fairhurst, from Prescot, Beaconsfield Street School, Church of England School. And one of my first encounters with the history of Prescot was that myself and Bobby, actually at that school, I must have only been in the second or third year of the school, so I'm talking about under 10, so probably about 8 years of age, where together we made a model of St. Mary's Church. And we made them from little clay blocks. You know, the clay, it was like a sculpture thing. And we modelled these little clay blocks to literally build St. Mary's Church stone by stone. And we thought it was a magnificent piece of art that we'd done, and we created a replica of St. Mary's Church. Now, to my young mind, I thought it was magnificent, that church, and the way that we did it. We did a fantastic job with little clay blocks. This is me describing that very moment. If you can lip read, turn the sound off and lip read, you might get the idea of what I'm saying. But basically, that was my first kind of introduction to how old the history of Prescot was. The church was a big feature in our young lives, and of course it still is now. I wonder what happened to that little model that we built all them years ago. It's probably in amongst all the things that are lost, the lost things of life. Time, as time goes by, it plays tricks on us, doesn't it? So I'm reaching the top of what was Pottery Croft. It was a meadow back then, and the actual churchyard starts roughly where I am now, and the churchyard was circular in shape, and this was typical of churches built before the Norman Conquest, so it's possible that there was a church in Prescot before 1066. It's not known when the first church in Prescot appeared. The earliest records of a church in Prescot were in 1140, and back then the church was known as St. Mary's the Blessed Virgin. If you look on old maps, you will see that in the churchyard there is an area called Priest's Cote, or Prescot, which is an Anglo-Saxon term for a priest's cottage, and it's where Prescot actually gets its name from today. So let's have a look at the church. Looking magnificent on this lovely sunny morning. The church, the only remaining parts of the medieval church are Anglo-Saxon font inside, and parts of the chancel wall and the chantry chapel, which is on the other side where we're going round to now. The chantry chapel, which we pass there, was built in 1410, and this would have been dedicated to a saint, of which we don't know what saint that was. So we're on Church Street now, which looks totally different than what it did back in the day, as we all know, and it's starting to rain. We're having a shower, which happens to turn out to be a very heavy shower. So I'll duck under this incidental tree. This is the I suppose the typical view, most iconic view of St. Mary's Church from Church Street that we know today. The bit on the left is the chantry chapel, which was built in 1410. The rest of the church was actually rebuilt in 1610, so it's 200 years difference between the two bits of the church, which I'm pointing out here. The steeple, well, that's of a different date. So there's three parts to this building that have different histories. In 1600, the church building was noted as being in a poor condition, and it was left because of the Reformation. You know, King Henry VIII and his dissolution of the monasteries and the persecution of the Catholics. Well, this was a Catholic church, and Prescot was a very Catholic place to be. We were staunchly Catholic round here, and if it wasn't for the Lord of the Manor and various church officials, no doubt the church wouldn't be here today. It would have been history, basically, because anything Catholic didn't survive the Reformation. Now at this point I must thank the ladies at Nude Hairdressing Salon who gave me shelter following that heavy rainstorm there. They were most interested in Born and Raised in Prescot, by the way, so I hope they've subscribed now to our channel. So back to the church. In 1600 the church buildings were noted as being in a very poor condition, and the rebuilding of the church took place in 1610. The chancel and nave were demolished and rebuilt, with the 14th century tower left as part of the church. This is the old medieval tower, remember. The two main benefactors for this were John Ogle and Sir Thomas Bold, which were John Ogle was part of the Wiston Township, and Thomas Bold the Bold Township, which were both parts of the parish of Prescot. The Ogle family, by the way, were stewards of the manor of Prescot. Now, bearing this in mind, 1610 was far too late for William Shakespeare to be in Prescot. We're talking about 1590s that he was actually here. So if he came back, if he did come to Prescot, the only bit he would still recognise of the church today would be the chancery on the left, which was more or less as it was in 1410. The rest of the church he wouldn't recognise at all, and he certainly wouldn't recognise the tower. Now you may be wondering at this point, I'm sure you are, you're about 10 minutes into the video, what is the flipping point? And I'm pointing to the point at the moment because I'm trying to explain to you what the flipping point is. And of course the flipping point is the point that we see, the tower. The tower, that's what this video is all about. It's all about St. Mary's Tower, which has a life of its own. It has a separate life from the rest of the church. Now, when this church was renovated in 1610, the original old medieval tower was there. The medieval tower going back to possibly 1300s. We have documentary evidence of a rector of Prescot, John Fairfax, who in 1393 left in his will £10, 10 whole pounds, to build a tower of stone for his church in Prescot. Yes, so that tower that was built in 1393 was still there in 1610, and it was the only bit of the really old medieval church that still existed. As you can see, we've gone round to the side now, and you can see that the tower looks like it's tacked on to the rest of the church. It's almost like an add-on. Now, this is a common practice amongst medieval churches, that the tower would be built separately, and you'll find this feature throughout churches throughout the land. Unfortunately, we have no illustrations of the old medieval tower, what it was like, unfortunately, as yet, but you never know, they may appear. So let's have a look around the back, have a look at the tower, and let's talk a bit about the history of the tower, but not just the tower, the spire as well. In 1719, a report was found that the 14th century original old tower, medieval, was unsafe, and it was recommended for it to be demolished. In 1729, a new tower and spire was built, and much of what you see here is from that building process of 1729. There is a dedication on the west side of the tower with the inscription Conditum Anno Domini 1729, which means completed in the year of our Lord 1729. The building of this tower and spire was not without its problems, and it was said to be putting too much stress on the entire building, along with lightning strikes, which it's known to have several lightning strikes. I'm pointing out there the lightning conductor. The tower was struck at least 3 times, and there was a danger of it being demolished completely. So can you imagine today the church without a tower? Well, if it wasn't for history, it could have well been that way. Yep. So the tower had to be replaced and rebuilt again in 1797. So let's talk a bit about the architecture of the tower on Prescot Hill. Already now, where it stands with the church, it's 250 feet above sea level. The tower and spire rise to 150 feet high. That's 400 feet. So it is a landmark. The tower and spire is regarded as the work of Nicholas Hawksmoor. It's attributed to Hawksmoor. Now what that means is historians have no recorded evidence that it was his work. But if you compare the work of St. Mary's Church here to the other works that Nicholas Hawksmoor has done, you will realise that it is very similar to them pieces of work. Hawksmoor was considered to be Christopher Wren's most noted pupil. Christopher Wren, of course, if you don't know, was the architect of St. Paul's Cathedral. And the tower and spire is said to have an individuality of style. The tower actually stands 75 foot high. Here I'm explaining that fact. The spire is 75 foot high. The tower and the spire are both in symmetry, 75 foot and 75 foot. This design for its time was most radical, and it's built in the English Baroque style. Now, for old Prescotians, this would have looked like the Theatre of the North looks today to our eyes, very modern, too modern for its time, really. I mean, I can imagine all the old Prescotians saying, "Oh, we want our medieval tower back. Oh, that was much better than this. This is a monstrosity. Oh, we don't like this." It was modern, it was of its time, it was radical and daring. Today, with modern tastes, it doesn't look satisfying in detail enough. It doesn't look enough Baroque, but this was modern Baroque, remember. And he's doing some really interesting things here. If you look up at the round-headed two light belfry windows, the two arches, well, these are references to a much earlier church, Anglo-Saxon times. And examples of these features can still be found on ancient churches today, churches and chapels throughout the land. These are enclosed by pilasters and entablatures in the Doric style. Pilasters, well, that's a column integrated into the wall, and it's purely decorative. And the entablatures, well, they're the horizontal decorative features at the top of the column. These reference Greek and Roman kind of designs in these modern features, as well as references to earlier architecture. There was a balustrade with ornamental parapet. Can you imagine that? And Renaissance vases, which hark back to the 14th and 16th century. The spire in itself, the spire was an incredible piece of architecture, octagonal in form, divided into 4 sections by architectural prominences and skirtings, mouldings with 3 tiers of spire lights in the Gothic form. Imagine that. This is something that Prescot had never seen before. At the very tip of the spire is a weather vane, and it's in the form of a lion, and the lion is on the emblem of the town's crest. The town's crest is also a crest that's shared with King's College, Cambridge, the story of which I'll leave for a future vlog. At this point, I hope you're enjoying this video, and if you are, then please subscribe to the channel and please leave a comment and the bell notification and various things like that you have to do on YouTube. I don't know why I'm saying this. Why am I saying this? So, why build a tower? It seems like an obvious question to ask, but why build a tower? What is it? Well, it certainly is a landmark. There's no doubt about that. This tower, when it was built, was the tallest building in southwest Lancashire. It could be seen for miles around. And maybe that's what the point was that it was seen from miles around. Remember the tiny township of Prescot that controlled such a big parish? It needed to be seen. It was the mother church of this parish, 53-mile parish that went from Rainford in the north to Widnes in the south. It was a really big parish. Even a tower of this height, you would be hard pressed to see it 53 miles away, but certainly you could see it from the Mersey. But it wasn't built for shipping, by the way. I mean, people have often quoted that idea that this tower was, it was a navigation aid to ships on the Mersey. Well, if it was, it's a very extravagant navigation aid. It wasn't meant as a navigation aid at all. It was primarily because it was that landmark. It was the idea that this is the mother church and you can see it for miles around. It was also to hold the bells that timed, that gave structure to the working day. The bells would chime every hour on the hour, and that is how you told the time before the advent of watchmaking in Prescot. Another purpose, and perhaps a more important purpose to have a tower and a spire is the very name spire, a spire. And it was to instill a kind of reverence to the church. It's almost like, as well as lightning, which the tower seemed to attract from a very early time, it was a kind of conduit to the heavens. It was a kind of thing to look up to. You looked up to the heavens, and it was almost like, I don't know if you remember that old rhyme that we used to have as children, you know, where you cross your fingers and you say, this is the church, this is the steeple, look inside and there are the people. And it's kind of like the steeple was the bringing into the church of the Holy Spirit and the Lord, if you like. It was bringing it down from the heavens. It was bringing that into the church, almost like a spiritual and magical way. And I think that's possibly one of the main reasons for the tower and the spire. So that's it. That's the flipping point of St. Mary's Church in Prescot. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog. I think I've waffled on enough about the tower and the church, and I hope you've got something out of it and discovered something of the history of St. Mary's Church and Prescot that you didn't know before. If you have, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Facebook group, and I'll see you again in a future vlog. In the meantime, I'll leave you with some views of St. Mary's Tower, and I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.
Wandering through old Prescot lanes, medieval tales within the veins, ghosts of Shakespeare in the air, timeless stories told with care. History lives in every street, echoes where past and present meet. Prescot town's treasure found, ancient magic all around. Cobblestones and market squares, fabled charm beyond compare. Boundaries of a town so grand, Shakespeare's whisper in the sand. History lives in every street, echoes where past and present meet. Prescot town's treasure found, ancient magic all around. Time moves slow, but memories hold, stories worth their weight in gold.